Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Ashton Rodenhiser, visual storyteller and professional doodler. Please enjoy Ashton Rodenhiser. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Ashton Rodenhiser, visual storyteller and professional doodler. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You are so welcome. I am excited to chat with you about all things creativity and how what you do fits into the creative world. But before we get into that, if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes and letting our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll introduce myself in a way of asking the question of, have you ever been in a meeting that was like super boring? And most people are
Yes.
like, yeah. Or that meeting that should have been an email. Yeah, lots of those. So a lot of organizations and businesses bring me in to help visualize the information or conversation that flows out of a meeting, a facilitated discussion, a conference, panels, basically wherever people are trying to get information across or have a conversation about something important. I'm there to try to help bring clarity, simplify the information, and put it into a visual form for people.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love that. Sounds so fun. A part of me kind of wishes that I had that doodle gene or doodle ability that other people have. My doodles could definitely not synthesize what someone was saying, but I think it's a great skill and gift when people do have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's something, it's something you can learn, right?
Yeah.
Like I got into this field more as a listener. So I was more of a facilitator. So I'd be the one at the front of the room navigating the questions, asking and connecting and making sure that people feel heard and valued in the space and that we're, moving along an agenda to try to get to some sort of outcome. So instead of feeding back in words as a facilitator, now I'm able to feed back in pictures. So about 10 years ago, when I found this existed as a thing, I was like, I really want to learn how to do this really, really well. But I came into it more, even though I've always been extremely creative. And I think I secretly wanted to be an artist when I grew up. I didn't actually draw a whole lot. So I had to actually really learn and beef up my drawing skills to learn how to do it really well. Whereas some people come into this line of work from an art background, or it's quite an eclectic crew, us worldwide community of people that do this thing. We all kind of come into it in a different way. And I kind of appreciate that I came into it more from a listening and a thinking and a synthesizing of information and less on the creative side, because now that I teach a lot of people how to do it, I can show them how awful my first works were because I came into it not as the best artist or the best doodler or drawer in the whole world. And I'm like, and I like kind of showing my progression over the years of just sticking with it and practicing and showing up and doing it.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I love being able to see that progression and let people know that this is something you can learn. It's a skill, just like creativity. It's a skill. If you put in the effort and energy, will continue to grow. So speaking of creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Yeah, I almost feel like it's my religion.
Ooh,
yeah.
love it.
It's sort of because I feel like it just like I'm just embodied by it in everything that I do. That I feel like it's in the same world of, instead of everyone going to church, I'm going to church on Sunday, I'm doing something creative. But it's just part of who I am. It's like part of my life philosophy. So it's like I feel like I wouldn't exist without it. And I feel like I have a really strong opinion about like everyone is creative in their own way. Most people just have this very odd relationship or have had bad experiences or somebody told them that they weren't creative, right? So it just sort of this, it's just sort of like I just feel like I'm an embodiment of it in a really weird way.
But how awesome is that to be an embodiment of creativity? And I think so many people wish that was their experience. So, how did you get to this point of being an embodiment of creativity?
I think I was getting, well, I think it might have started like in my early 20s, and I started doing a lot of community development work. And I find people cannot support and appreciate creativity within themselves or creativity around them if they don't have an opportunity to see and experience it. And the problem is we don't give people, there's no like non-threatening, lower barrier to entry ways to explore what you might like when it comes to creativity. So if you don't have an opportunity to experience it, then like that's it. Like you won't even have an opportunity, right? So
Yeah.
I was inspired by an event and created one in my own hometown that I ran for 7 years, and it was like a little art at night festival. And the purpose of putting that together was to allow people to experience all variety of forms of creativity, right? Not just what our default thinking is, which is like go to an art gallery, look at a painting on the wall, and then you don't get it, and then you feel stupid because you don't understand it.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So like there's more to art and creativity than that world. And there's definitely a certain level of appreciation that we can have for very talented artists. But I don't like the separation that we have. Like, oh, well, I can't do that, therefore I am not. And I think that's why organizing this festival and allowing people to have experiences that they wouldn't normally have and are really like, it's a festival, so everybody's kind of there doing it. So you're just kind of part of the crowd. You're not like, if you go to an art gallery, like I wouldn't want to go to an art gallery if like I knew I was the only one going to be in there. Like I feel like weird and like I stick out and like uncomfortable if I don't like understand it or like just like it's weird, right? So it was so that, and then I started working in this field and I really fell in love with doodling as in the same world of as a non-threatening lower barrier to entry and into kind of a creative space, because majority of people, even if they don't consider themselves creative now, likely have or maybe still do make little doodles without even really thinking too much about it and put too much pressure on yourself in their notebook or in their agenda or whatever it is, right? And because it's such a beautiful non-threatening art form, I think people don't necessarily think of it as creativity in a sense. It's like, oh, I'm just doing this thing. And I'm like, but you're doing something creative. And then you could do something with those doodles to make them more meaningful for you. Or what does that look like? Right. And so that's sort of like the way that I sort of really love kind of talking and teaching and all things is kind of from the entry point of a doodle.
I love it. Now, as you were talking, I got super curious. Seeing as how the professional doodling is a job, when you are listening to conversations or someone explains something, are you doodling in your mind if you're not doodling on paper? Like, how would you doodle this conversation? Or like, or is it something you turn off and turn on at certain points when it's like, oh, this is when I'm doodling? I'm just so curious.
Yeah, I think like sometimes even when I'm like engrossed in a listening to something, I'll be listening, I'll be like, oh wait, I should be doodling this, or I should be drawing this out. Like, duh, this is like what I do for a living. Like I should be doing this for myself because I just do it so much for other people. I have to be like extra
Yeah.
conscious. I'm like, oh right, I should be doing this for my own learning. Hello.
Right.
But yeah, like I think like most of us think in pictures, and I think that's why the doodle is like such a beautiful way to as an entry point for people. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, people when you talk about it, like the example I like to give is, you know, like YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's visual. We want to see what people are doing, and you might not equate that to creativity or art, but you know, from a visual form, that's what we like to do. We want to
Yeah.
see things, right? And yeah, it's I it is sort of like this weird like other language in your mind that you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of hone over time, so that when someone says something that may be a little bit extra complicated, you have a little bank of images that you already know how to draw, right? You're
Oh,
not just doing it on the fly, that you already
yeah.
know how to draw, so that when you go to put pen to paper, there's not a hesitation there, right?
Mm.
So you have like a little icon library, call it like a visual vocabulary in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
all these drawings that you already, I think people think there's magic, and there is magic to like live illustration,
Yeah.
but there also isn't, in the sense of like, I think they think that's the first time I've ever drawn that thing before. And that's not the case at all. I've probably drawn it hundreds, if not more times
Right.
before, right? Or I'll tell people, like, if you ever see me like off on my phone, I swear I am not ignoring what's happening. I'm either trying to see if I spelled something right, or Google imaging something to see if I'm like, oh, how do I draw this thing?
I love it's great to hear that the lexicon of images needs support sometimes.
Absolutely. I have all my favorite websites for little icons on how
Oh,
to
I love
draw
it.
stuff.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the like most fun professional doodling experience you've ever had?
Mm. Yeah, well, to give you some context, I was trying to do some of my numbers today. I think I'm like by the end of this year, I'm going to be well over 400 like drawings of information, so like presentation
Wow.
or a day-long meeting. And last year was over 600.
Oh my goodness.
So like that's a lot. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to think about certain moments. But I guess if I want to name drop, I was on stage with Steve Wozniak one time. That
Fun.
was pretty wild experience. That was
Yeah.
pretty wild. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's the inventor of the World Wide Web, I was on a stage with him one time. That was pretty crazy.
How
Um,
cool.
yeah, other than that, I don't know. Like it's the funny little ones that stick out to me, where
Yeah.
they're more about when I was in more of a facilitated session, and
Mm-hmm.
people came up and said really powerful things to me. Like,
Mm.
I worked here for 40 years and no one has ever asked me how I felt before, right?
Oh
Allowing
yeah.
people to feel seen. Those
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that really stand out and kind of like, oh, like get you in the heart every
Yeah.
time. Those
Oh.
are those are really like, I have, you know, there is such an honor to be there
Mm-hmm.
in those situations where people really need a voice. And if I can help in my way, allow
Yeah.
them to feel like they have that voice and that people do care about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's pretty powerful. So it's usually those types of
Yeah.
ones that really kind of stick out in my mind. Like, you know, the fancy dudes on the stage, that's one thing, but like the person who's been working there and looks like they should have retired a long time ago, but they're still
Right.
showing up to this job at like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. I
Those are
love
the ones
it.
that get me every time. That's for sure. Yeah.
Nice. It sounds like that your presence and the questions that you've asked and how you just show up in the space with them offered them a source of inspiration for them to keep going or think of things in a new way or feel valued differently than they had. I'm curious, who or what inspires you in your world?
Yeah, well, where I live, there's a lot of like folk art, and I'm not
Mm.
sure what people think of when they think of folk art in the different areas of the world, but
Yeah.
there's a very specific feel of folk art where I live, and there was a very famous folk artist, and her little tiny house actually lives in the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. Her
Mm.
name is Maud Lewis, and she's like awesome. And I love I love folk art
Mm.
because folk art is you have no experience,
Mhm.
right? And you create on whatever you have around. And
Yeah.
I love that. And a lot of it is like a lot of them use like really bold colors, like thick black lines. I love that style. Right. I love a lot of bold color and thick black lines. Like I could take that every day. So I feel like I lean in on and love to get inspiration from people who are more of that like salt of the earth. I'm
Mm.
just going to use what I have. I don't have any experience, but that's okay. I'm just going to create. I'm going to make my little carved bird, paint it really bright colors. I really love that. And I feel like, I wasn't creative for a while,
Mm.
and it was folk art that kind of got me back into
Mm.
it and learning more about like Maud Lewis in particular, because I was like, well, like she just had like scraps of wood and like look at these cute little paintings she did. Like cute little cats and stuff. Like they're just so fun and they just make you smile. Like you cannot look at her cute little cats and like smile at them, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I guess maybe there's like a theme of like the underdog here. I love
Yeah.
all things like less and I actually get very I don't know how I feel about even like the word like professional artist, because like what does
Mm.
that even mean? Like what is being a professional artist? Like am I or is somebody else because they've never gone to art school, or like is
Mm.
it number of years, or like is it because you exhibited somewhere fancy? Like, when just calling yourself an artist I think can be really hard for people. I know it is
Yeah.
for me, but then, calling yourself like, oh, well, I'm a professional artist.
Mhm.
It's like there's like a funny thing around it. And like when do you get comfortable saying that you are? And like what check boxes, invisible check boxes do you have to like check off to
Yeah.
be a professional artist?
Those are
You know?
great questions.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
I don't think there are no answers. That's like
Yeah.
the beauty and the sadness in it,
Yeah.
because I think we put a lot of um there's just stigma and there's pressure
Yeah.
and there's like all these things that we think we need to do or that we shouldn't do in order to like, and
Yeah.
like if you ask children, like that was my first profession, was like working with little kids.
Mhm.
And if you ask little kids, are you an artist, they're like, yeah,
Why are
of
you
course I
asking me?
am.
Right. Yeah.
Like, duh. Like my 8-year-old, I love asking him. I'm like, are you an artist, dude? And he's like, yeah, like, duh. Because he's got attitude, man. He's like so funny,
I love
but
it.
and I actually was on a podcast recently and she posted a reel on Instagram and it went viral
Oh, wow.
with 1.3 million views and like 1,500 hate comments on it.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
said something along the lines of, you know, have a conversation with children about art, right?
Yeah.
Don't be like, oh, it's beautiful, and that's it. And everyone was really hateful about that because I said, don't compliment their artwork, which is not what I was saying, really.
Right.
But I'm like, art exists to create a conversation. That's why it exists in the world, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I
Right.
would absolutely agree with that.
Right. And I'm like, if you're just saying to a child, oh, that's nice. That's beautiful. That's whatever. And then that's it. End of conversation.
Mhm.
Right. You can still praise your kids, of course. Like do
Yeah.
that, please. But, I think like there was in my little town here, some guy put like a piece of a boat that was very politically charged because this boat had been there forever as like an eyesore. And he took a part of it and he put it on his lawn and everyone was complaining about it. It's like, oh, this guy's got trash on his lawn, blah. He went to council and he said, but it's art. What you gonna do about it? He didn't say what you gonna do about it. That's what I imagined he was saying in his mind.
In his
was, what you
mind.
gonna do about it? And he's
Mic
like,
drop. It's art.
he's like, well, it's artwork. And council, right? And this is like a little town of like 8,000 people, right? So like everyone's in everybody's business. And council's like, what do we, how do we, oh, well, like we don't have any bylaws when it comes to artwork. And like everyone's saying it's trash and the dude's saying it's art. How are, like, what are you supposed to say to that?
Right.
Right. And they, like, I kind of just, I was very like in and out of the community, like doing my like art festival. So I was like kind of like on the periphery of like watching this unfold to see how it was all going to be handled. And that was a couple of years ago and it's still sitting on his lawn. So, you know, but
one man's trash is another man's treasure.
I know, right? And so it's such a funny, like, I think, you know, for good or bad, I think sometimes art can create, and it's there to create a conversation.
Absolutely. Create a conversation, inspire an emotional reaction or response, good, bad, ugly, all of the above. I think art makes you think about something, about yourself, about the world in a different way. And I think we all need more of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I was working at a tech conference a couple years ago, and there was this woman, and she was talking about even then it was like, I think it was like 2018. It was actually in Denver.
Oh,
actually it was. That's when I was
I
there.
love it.
And you know, she was very well regarded, or apparently. I don't usually like research these people before I show up because it freaks me out if I find out they're really fancy people with all these books and followers and all that.
Yeah.
So I just show up and I'm like, I don't know who these people are. And she was talking about AI, machine learning, and all of this. And someone in the audience asked her, you know, my daughter's about to graduate high school. Like, what would you recommend? You know, and I think he was expecting her to say like computer science or this or that. She said art school. And I'm there drawing and I'm like, oh, art school. Interesting. And she went on to say about the skills that you learn in art school, right? The creative thinking, the problem solving, that cause and effect, like all of these things, right? And I thought that was extremely fascinating from someone who just gave a presentation on like all things extremely technical, right?
And AI, which is now that big conversation of
and this was a long time, this was
creativity.
quite a few years ago, so now it is, right? And like I do work in a lot of technical spaces, but it's like I think creative thinking and creative skills and that like human connection, those are the things that organizations, corporations, nonprofits, like everybody is going to be wanting to be looking towards.
Absolutely.
Because you can automate, you're going to be able to automate like everything. You cannot automate human connection
or the creative process.
And creativity is just a natural fit for all things human connection.
Absolutely. And 2017 Forbes magazine said creativity is the skill of the future.
Yeah, there you
go.
There
you have it.
Be curious what they would say now, and I would guess they would say the same thing. Like it still is the future here. People.
Still is the future. I hope they say that because it feels very, very truthful, very honest in that it is. We're constantly moving in that creative direction and the human connection direction as well. Hopefully. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. Well, working with people or having your art fairs and all of these things, but I imagine you come across people who don't believe they are creative. How would you encourage others to find creativity in their life?
Yeah, if I have the opportunity to have a conversation with people, usually I like to learn why they believe that. And 9 times out of 10, there was some story that was told to them or some bad experience. And I like to humanize that for people, and say, unfortunately, most people I meet have had a negative experience.
Yeah.
And I hope that they are open to the idea that that was not true, right? That teacher, and my grade 4 teacher told me I was painting wrong. And my grade 4 9-year-old little brain went, is not artistic, does not compute. Like, that's it.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, that's it. I'm done. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And, I was the odd one in my family. I was the artsy one. And it's like, my family didn't know what to do with me. Right. So it's not like it was, they encouraged music and things, but they didn't encourage other types of creativity in like a broader sense. Like, you can do your cute little cross stitching, because I was such a little old lady as a little kid knitting, and you can do that, but like, you can't do it as a job, right? Like, that's
Right.
not going to work out for you, right? So anyways, I digress, but I think I like to just have a human connection with someone and say, why do you think that? Like, can you, I'm going to tell you my story. Maybe you'll tell me your story of like why you got to that place. And like I said, most of the time there is something that told them, some experience that told them, I am not creative.
Yeah.
Right. So I think just acknowledging that happened, that doesn't have to be your future. Like, you can start today and identify as a creative person. You can just choose to take that label off that someone put on you as you not being creative, and like, be like, hey, you, never mind. Maybe I am creative. Like, I am, right? And try to empower them to believe it for themselves. And then encourage them to find what resonates with them the most. And it may be not painting or drawing or doing something that way, but it could be storytelling or comedy or writing. Like, there's so many, like, the options are endless.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of like, having different experiences and allowing yourself to try things and maybe it not working out. Like, I've tried so many creative mediums throughout my life. And at one point I just had to get rid of all these supplies because I'm like, that was just a moment in time. I tried it out. I didn't love it. And that's okay. I'll donate my felting or encaustic or whatever I was trying at the time, supplies to someone who will appreciate and enjoy them for a while. So you have to give yourself permission to also go into a space of exploration to find out what it is that you feel excited about, right? And honestly, part of my love for the work that I do, and especially when doing it for others, is I'm an impatient person. I don't want to take a week or even a few hours to create something. That sounds awful.
Yeah. Fair.
And a lot of creative mediums, like, they're so time consuming. And I'm actually like, that's not my jam. Like, I want to get in there, draw a picture and get out. Like, I can draw 10 presentations in a day, like, done. And I'm not editing. We're not finessing. It is what it is. Right? And I love the quickness of it, and like that immediacy. But a lot of other art forms, they just take too long. I just don't have the patience for it.
So great to know about yourself, right?
And like, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. We have these things that we say like, oh, we're so impatient. I'm like, that's not a bad thing. Like, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. So, find it, like, look at things that are part of how you like to be. Are you impatient like me? Like, would you do something like me where you can just like draw something like in 5 minutes, be like, it's done? Or do you love that like zone flow creative process, or writing a haiku versus writing a book? Totally different types of writing. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love all these reminders and the permission, and that it's okay to try something and discover, not for me. And move
Yeah.
on to the next thing. I think that definitely causes a lot of challenges for people when they feel like, oh, I chose something, I have to stick with it.
Have to stick.
But yeah.
Yeah. My philosophy is I feel like maybe controversial. You got me like in a very controversial space
Oh,
today. I don't know. But
welcome. I love it.
they call it the sunk cost bias, which I
Oh,
love. And it's this notion that, well, you've already invested time, energy, and
um,
money. You might as well finish. You might as well do it. So let's say you are 3/4 of a university degree and you got
yeah.
a quarter left. You might as well finish it, even if you know you will never use it. You're like, this is not my jam. I don't want to do this. No, thank you, please.
Yeah.
Right? The shame that you'll feel, the people around you will make you feel like garbage because
Oh,
you didn't finish, right? But think about what you could have done with that, whatever, 3, 4 months.
yeah.
You could have like created a whole new thing for yourself or explored the world or
Totally.
tried stand-up comedy or like did something that you actually would want to do, right?
Yeah.
But we're like, that's why um I think sometimes like businesses fail
Mm,
because they're not willing to pivot quickly enough because they've
mhm.
already invested so much money into one direction. We
Yeah.
couldn't possibly just abandon it right before launch, even though we know it's going to flop,
Right.
So it's a funny little thing, that sunk cost bias, but like I don't make my kids finish stuff. And I feel like I'm in the minority of that because when I'm around other like moms and they're like, I told him if he had signed up for soccer that he better do it. And I'm like, I'm not going to make my kid finish it. Like, I'd like to find
Yeah.
out why, but if he's like, I'm just not feeling it, I'd rather just play soccer. This is exactly what happened to my son. He's like, I don't know, I just want to do it at home. I don't want to like do a game. I'm like, cool, that's fine by
Yeah.
me. Like, and like, unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to money, right? Like, oh, I paid the
Sure.
money. And I'm like, oh, well, like the 3 lessons he didn't go to, like in this little group soccer thing. And I'm like, he was only like 6 at the time. Like, it's fine. It's not going to define him if he doesn't go to the last 3 group soccer practices,
Sure.
and we just have a conversation about it and be like, you know, what would you like to do? Would you like to try something else? Like whatever. Like my
Mhm.
kids just kind of do their own thing. Like I don't sign them up for like a million things
Yeah.
because they have other opportunities to do things. Anyway, so on another tangent there,
Which is
but
such a gift, I think, with
yeah.
the overscheduled child adventure that so many people are on. I
Yeah.
think it is a gift to allow the freedom of choice and being willing to pivot, even if it means it, in quotes, costs you something.
Yeah.
So,
If you want to quit because it's hard, that's not an excuse.
right.
Right. I love this thing that I heard, and I wish I could remember who I heard it from. And I think it was like an Olympian. And of course, she didn't want to practice. She had a hard day and she told her mom, I'm going to quit. And the mom said, you can quit when you have a good day. And I love that
Yeah.
idea because you you don't have to quit just because you had a hard day. Like you
Right.
might still really love it, but you might have lost that game or you had a really hard workout or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Or
Yeah.
you might create a piece of art and like the next 3, like they just did not, you're just not happy with them.
Right.
But it's not that you don't love doing it. It just, it's unfortunately likely that it's going to be fun 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not allowed to quit if it's still something that you love, you're just having a
Right.
hard time or something's challenging.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I'm never going to do this again, and I feel pretty confident in saying that
That's a
because
different
it's just not
experience.
my jam for whatever
Yeah.
reason, like think about all the other things that you could be learning or doing or
Hmm.
exploring if you would have given yourself permission to let go. But yeah, like I said, there is a lot of stigma and shame
Yeah.
around that. a lot of people around us don't feel that way.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been such a fantastic and delightful conversation. We could absolutely talk for so much longer.
I know. I'm sad it's over already.
I know. Well, I do have one last question for you.
Yeah, sure.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Oh my gosh. In my body, that's a really fascinating one. Okay, I'm just going to say the first thing that comes to my mind, which is breathing.
Ooh,
Mm.
nice.
I think because of the embodiment I talked about earlier, I was like, it's just like, yeah, just breath, I would say. That's how it feels.
So
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If people want to learn more about the work that you do, get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, I kind of have two different ways. So if you're like, ooh, I have a conference or a meeting, and see if she wants to do this in person or virtually, you could hit me up on mindsedeyecreative.ca. And that's all live illustration, graphic facilitation, all that good stuff. And if you're like, ooh, this sounds really cool, maybe I'd like to learn how to do this, you can head over to sketchnote.school. I've got a weekly newsletter. I've got a community. I have a book called The Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting. And yeah, if you're like, I like doodling, maybe I could, step it up a little bit, then you can hang out with me over there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. It's been such a treat.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.